Tower Defense Simulator has many different types of towers, each having their own way of contributing to winning. Some have their own strengths in certain areas, while slacking in others. I was a bit curious and decided to test every single tower in the game to see how long they could survive. I wanted to separate these towers in three different categories. The first being normal towers. Normal towers are what they sound like. They are normal towers that you can get from the shop as long as you have the required level. The next category will be event towers. Event towers are labeled exclusive in your inventory and are often quite rare. The last category will be golden towers. Golden towers come from the golden crates, each costing 50,000 gold. With that out of the way, let's quickly go over the rules. For this challenge, the rules are pretty simple. The first rule being the same map for every tower, which will be 4 seasons. And trust me, I got sick of this map very quickly. Second rule, no bringing other towers, which includes supports and blah blah blah. Third, auto skip will always be turned on, which means the towers better keep up with the wave times. Fourth, no other players. I am not allowed to have any other players in the same game as me, which brings me to my last rule, no favoritism. I will try my best not to do horribly with a tower I do not like. Instead, I will treat each of the towers as if they were my child, locked in my base. For the first tower, we have Scout. Scout is, well, a beginner tower, so I didn't expect much out of him. Early game, he did quite well and didn't really encounter any obstacles. Everything was smooth sailing for Scout and only came across a difficult opponent on wave 22, which was the slow boss. Slow boss takes a fat amount of damage because of his high health of 1600, making him basically a walking meat shield. At the end of the day, two slow bosses push the defenses far back and Shocks are able to run right through, ending the run on wave 30. With that, Scout is currently the best, making him the king. Next up we have Sniper. Sniper, similar to Scout, is a beginner tower. Sniper did okay at early game, having such a slow fire rate, making this game take ages. Sniper did not come by any threats until Breakers. Breakers pushed back the Snipers so far and were a huge threat, but you will find later that they cause much more problems for other towers. Wave 20, I already started to get backed up by Moltons and the Necromancer, and slowly but surely kept getting more and more backed up. The slow boss spawned in wave 22 and 23, pushing my snipers to the absolute limit. Hidden boss wasn't much of a threat since Sniper had such a long range, but slow bosses and Moltons pushed my defenses farther and farther back. Similar to Scout, the Shocks ended up ending the run. Paintballer is probably one of the most underrated towers in the whole game. Paintballer is set to last rolls the early game. Though he did struggle with the boss, sadly having to tank it, Paintballer was doing very good until Hidden showed up and ended Paintballer on wave 18. Demo Man was our next victim. Demo Man struggled the first 2 waves, but once I got that level 2 upgrade, Demo Man made all the other beginner towers look pathetic. Demo Man did leak a few breakers, but proceeded to dominate the rest of the waves. Demo Man eventually lost on wave 40 to a speedy boss, making Demo Man the current trophy holder. Soldier was able to easily make his way through the early and mid game. It wasn't until the 2 slow bosses when there was an actual threat. It pushed the soldiers back quite a bit, but they quickly recovered. I want you to take a quick guess at who ends this run, and if you said Shocks, you are incorrect. The breakers were able to push through by a slim amount of health. Soldier was ended on wave 34. Isn't as good as Demo Man, but puts him in a temporary second place. Move aside, Demo Man, because here comes Freezer. You know, the best tower in the game by a landslide. Reality aside, I won't even show you the run, because Freezer's just too awesome, and because I think Freezer is too good, I will humble Freezer to be placed at wave 12. Actually, I will show you this small clip of my avatar that was for some reason a noob. Next up we have the Hunter. Hunter honestly did not do as well as I expected. Though he did recently see a small buff, he did not do that great. Early game, yeah, sure, he did pretty good, but when it came to late game, Hunter struggled a lot more. Hunter got pushed back by the two slow bosses and quickly died to the hidden boss. Hunter, making it to wave 32, didn't do too bad. Now we move into the next section of towers, also known as the intermediates. The first of which is Crook Boss. Crook Boss started off pretty strong and did especially good in mid-game, being able to defeat the slow bosses with ease. That all changed when wave 31 came around. 6 slow bosses and a speedy boss spawned, which pushed the defenses far back, heavily relying on the bodyguards. Sadly, they were not enough, and Crook Boss died to shocks and breakers on wave 34. Altogether, good performance by Crook Boss. Next on the list is Ace Pilot. Ace Pilot did really good in early and even better in mid game. Ace was able to do splash and single target damage, which was what made Ace so successful in their run. Throughout the whole run, there was little threats. Ace did not have enough to kill the boss, and a Molten Titan ended up walking in with the boss having 35,127 health. You will see later why I'm being so specific. Ace Pilot is now crowned as the king, with Demo Man now falling in second place. Next, I decided to do the only two towers that can't deal damage, which is Farm and DJ. Because of Farm's amazing farming and DJ's amazing DJing, we were able to get all the way to wave 12. Now we have a tower that is a little bit more promising, aka Militant. Militant used to be one of the worst towers in the game, and I would say the buff they got was pretty good. Militant was pretty strong in early and mid game, but ended up dying to a mafia of breakers. Pyro. Yeah, he did kind of okay, I guess. I don't know how to describe it. He did really good against hordes of enemies in the early to mid game, but fell off pretty fast upon the arrival of Big Fungus Chungus. Due to a bunch of sweaty gaming, I was able to make Pyro survive till wave 32. The fact that a guy with a flamethrower, who's not meant to kill big bosses, and is more of a support tower in mid to late game, was able to make it to wave 32 completely shocked me. You get it? Shoegooner. Trust me, that is the correct French pronunciation. All of the French people watching this video will approve. Anyways, Shoegooner did pretty good early, mid, and not late game. Let's just say Shoegooner kind of got rolled by the shocks, which really shocked me. Wave 28. Decent. Next up, we have Rocketeer. I had to save a few waves for him, but the catch is that it was not worth it. Rocketeer did not do that great, and by themselves is quite weak. Ended up dying on wave 30 to a breaker and not a shock, which is There are two intermediate towers that I have not mentioned yet, which are Military Base and Medic. I may or may not have forgot to record them, but I did realize my mistake at the end of each of them, and recorded the last bit for proof. Military Base kind of got wrecked by breakers, and Medic just got destroyed in mid-game in general. That's basically it about them. Now we got our good old Cowboy. Cowboy did pretty good. Being able to generate their own source of income and defend at the same time is a pretty powerful concept. Cowboy fell off in late game because of his not so high DPS, and was eventually ended by another mafia of breakers on wave 35. Overall, Cowboy did surprisingly well. Next up is Mortar, who did surprisingly well. Mortar, a tower with no hidden detection, was able to successfully make it all the way to wave 30 because of the hiddens and hidden bosses walking into hordes of enemies, meaning that Mortar's gigantic nukes are likely going to hit them. Turret did pretty good throughout early and mid game. Though I did forget to record the first 20 waves of Turret, it is pretty obvious what happened. Turret did pretty well, but sadly was ended to stupid breakers on wave 34. Pursuits. We don't speak of Pursuit. Next tower, please. I did not realize until this game that Electroshocker is actually really good. Electroshocker was really good against hordes of enemies and was able to also deal with bosses. but every amazing tower has a small placement limit and no hidden detection. Wave 18 though. Commander did pretty bad, but better than I expected at least. Using Commander's Call to Arms ability, I was able to make Commander survive up to Wave 14. Next up was the Warden. Warden is kind of a broken tower when it comes to singling out high health targets, but struggles against hordes of enemies. Surprisingly, I was able to make it all the way to Wave 40, where Warden was able to knock the Molten Boss down to 38,140 health, which earns him the second place award, with Ace still on top. I was expecting pretty big things from Minigunner, and was ready to see a good performance, but that readiness was all for nothing because Minigunner got backed up heavily by the slow bosses and breakers, eventually dying to breakers again on Wave 34. Ranger, because of their extremely slow fire rate and no hidden detection, ended up dying on Wave 15 to hiddens. Accelerator was kind of a pain to save up for, since they are the most expensive tower in the game. But once I got one down, Accelerator did really well. Sadly, I wasn't able to save for a max Accelerator and instead got a bunch of level 4s, which ended up causing me to die on Wave 40 to, you guessed it, breakers. Engineer being a pretty solid DPS tower because of the Engineer's ability to attack any enemy with 3 sentries each dealing 100 DPS plus their rockets. Engineer is pretty powerful. You can really only do that if you have a maxed out Engineer. And similar to Accelerator, I was not able to max out Engineer and eventually died to breakers on Wave 37. Now we move into the event towers, with our first one being Executioner. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to save up for a level 4 in time, which gives hidden detection. Gladly, I was able to save up for it just in time as well. Executioner is also the most broken tower in the game. Like, actually broken. Executioner, surprisingly, was able to make it all the way to Wave 40, getting the boss down to 41,893 health, earning it 3rd place. I wasn't expecting much from Archer, and I am glad I did not have much hope in him. Eventually, the slow bosses backed the archers up and shocks ran right through, ending Archer's run on Wave 27. After Archer came Sludger. Sludger did surprisingly very well in early game, but fell off when it came to hiddens because, breaking news, Sludger has no hidden detection. They made it to Wave 18. The next tower I had very high hopes for, which was Gladiator. Gladiator did extremely well in early, mid, and late game, and really only struggled against the Molten Boss, who got all the way down to 25,650 health, putting Gladiator on top. Toxic Gunner is their next hidden detectionless loser, and though level 3 Toxic Gunner spam is super good, they ended up dying on Wave 18. Elf Camp had a pretty rough start, and got a bit close to dying in mid-game because apparently a breaker can one-shot any elf. Anyways, they ended up coming back for a little bit, but got shut down by breakers, losing on Wave 36. Now we move on to Golden Towers, and for our first Golden Tower we have the Golden Scout. Golden Scout excelled at early and mid-game. Though Golden Scout struggled a little bit in late game, they ended up coming back. Because of Golden Scout having a good DPS output for how much you spend, they were able to kill the Molten Boss, placing Golden Scout in first place, dethroning Gladiator. I knew Golden Soldier wouldn't do as well as Golden Scout, and I was correct for thinking so. Golden Soldier just didn't have as good of a DPS for their cost, and eventually died to a speedy boss on Wave 40. Golden Crook boss was magnificent in the early and mid game. Though I knew Golden Crook wouldn't do as good as Golden Scout and Soldier, I was pretty positive I could make it far. Eventually, the Mafia of Breakers got through and proved to be the dominant Mafia. Next, we have the arsonist gangster himself, Golden Pyro. Golden Pyro did pretty well, and similar to regular Pyro, struggled against tankier bosses, and eventually died on Wave 32 to a speedy boss similar to regular Pyro. It's not that Golden Pyro is not any better than regular Pyro, It's just that the speedy boss was too much for both, although Golden Pyro was very close to killing the first speedy boss. For Golden Cowboy, I decided to use the retired skin, since I am almost done with this challenge. I had the super strategy of putting a bunch of level 2 cowboys in the front to make the money and have the actual high TPS cowboys in the back. My strategy only got me to wave 35, which isn't that bad, except for the fact that regular cowboy got just as far. I guess the Breaker Mafia just want to prove more of their dominance. Lastly, Golden Minigunner. Golden Minigunner had a pretty good early game, and was at his strongest during mid-game. I decided to get a bunch of level 3 minigunners since level 4 had such bad value, and ended up making it all the way to wave 37, dying to breakers. Well, that's just about every single tower that I own, and the results are Golden Scout being first place, being able to kill the Molten Boss. Gladiator takes second, knocking the boss down to 25,000 health. And for third, we have Ace Pilot, who brought the Molten Boss down to 35,000 health. Here's the list of where each tower placed. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, so see you on the next one.